Haha. Funny, isn't it? They thought you were just another face in the crowd, another forgotten name, another insignificant piece on the board. But somewhere, someone with power, someone who sees things others don't, they connected 3 dots, 3 little dots, and suddenly, you became the one thing they can't stop thinking about. Now they're watching. Now they're asking questions. Now they're obsessed, because they finally realized something terrifying. You weren't lost. You were hidden. And once people at the top recognize what you really are, they don't sleep peacefully anymore. They thought they discovered you, but they have no idea. They just woke up something they can't control. And tonight, I'm going to tell you why, the moment they connected those 3 dots, everything changed forever. Haha. You know what makes me laugh? They spent years looking everywhere else, chasing louder people, worshipping bigger names, listening to the same voices everyone else listened to. And all that time, you were right there, quiet, watching, learning, becoming something nobody could understand because nobody was paying attention. That's the funny part. People think danger announces itself. They think greatness wears expensive clothes and screams for attention. They think power has to introduce itself. But real power hides in plain sight. And they missed it. Not once, not twice. Over and over again. They saw pieces of you, but they never put them together. They noticed your patience, but they ignored it. They saw your silence, but they called it weakness. They saw your discipline, but they thought it was luck. They saw your strange way of thinking and convinced themselves it meant nothing. Because people only understand what they're prepared to understand. And they weren't prepared for you. So they laughed. They doubted. They overlooked. And while they were busy measuring everybody else, you kept growing in places they couldn't see. You learned from pain. You learned from rejection. You learned from betrayal. You learned from loneliness. Every scar became information. Every failure became knowledge. Every disappointment became another piece of the puzzle. But they couldn't see the whole picture. Not yet. Because people are blind when something doesn't fit their expectations. They wanted you to stay ordinary. They wanted you to stay predictable. They wanted you to stay in the little box they created inside their minds. And when you didn't, they became confused. Then something happened. Not something big. Not some dramatic explosion. Not some miracle from the sky. Just 3 little dots. 3 observations. 3 moments. Maybe they noticed how people listen when you speak. Maybe they noticed how pressure never breaks you. Maybe they noticed how you keep moving forward while others make excuses. 3 dots. That's all it took. And suddenly, the picture appeared. Suddenly they remembered every moment they ignored. Every warning they laughed at. Every sign they dismissed. Every strange feeling they couldn't explain. And that's when the obsession began. Because once people see what they missed, they can't unsee it. Their minds keep replaying everything. How did we overlook this? How long has this been happening? What else have we failed to notice? Questions become chains. Curiosity becomes addiction. And regret becomes torture. Because they realize the truth nobody likes to admit. Greatness doesn't appear overnight. It grows in silence. It develops in darkness. It waits patiently while the world is distracted. And by the time people finally connect the dots, it's already too late. Because while they were sleeping, you were building. While they were talking, you were observing. While they were competing with each other, you were competing with the person you used to be. They thought they were ahead. They thought they understood the game. They thought they knew who mattered. But they were staring at the wrong players. That's why their eyes changed. That's why their attitude changed. That's why their voices became different. Because now they know something they wish they had discovered much earlier. They weren't looking at someone ordinary. They were looking at someone they underestimated. And the terrifying thing about underestimating someone is that once the dots connect, nobody remembers when the transformation started. They only remember the moment they finally realized what had been standing in front of them all along. Haha. And that realization, it stays with them. Haha. Isn't it strange? People with power are supposed to have everything figured out. They're supposed to know who's important and who's not. They're supposed to see the future before anyone else does. That's what everyone believes. But sometimes, the people sitting at the top become fascinated by something they can't explain. And that's where things get interesting, because powerful people don't become obsessed with noise. They become obsessed with mysteries. They don't care about people who beg for attention. They don't lose sleep over people who desperately try to impress everyone around them. They've seen too many loud voices, too many fake kings, too many temporary stars. Nothing surprises them anymore until they notice someone different. Someone who doesn't chase approval. Someone who remains calm when everybody else is desperate. Someone who keeps moving without announcing every step. Someone who speaks less but means more. Haha, that's unusual. And unusual things attract attention. At first, they tell themselves it's nothing. Just another face. Just another dreamer. Just another person trying to become something. But then they notice something strange. You don't react the way other people react. Pressure doesn't make you panic. Failure doesn't make you disappear. Criticism doesn't make you surrender. Loneliness doesn't make you desperate. Most people break when life gets heavy. But you become quieter. You become sharper. You become harder to understand. And powerful people notice patterns. That's why they're powerful. They recognize what others ignore. They can smell potential hidden beneath pain. They can sense discipline hidden beneath silence. They can see hunger hidden beneath humility. And suddenly, their curiosity begins. They start asking questions. Not because they want to destroy you. Not because they hate you. Because they need to understand you. Because things they cannot explain bother them. People at the top hate mysteries. They hate unanswered questions. They hate unpredictable forces. And you've become one. Haha. They've met talented people before. They've met intelligent people before. They've met confident people before. But very few people possess something far more dangerous. Consistency. And that's what captures their minds. Because talent can disappear. Luck can disappear. Popularity can disappear. But discipline terrifies people who understand power. Because they know what happens when patience and purpose combine. They know what happens when somebody refuses to quit. They know what happens when a person survives years of disappointment without losing focus. That's why they start watching. Not publicly. Quietly. They observe your habits. They study your choices. They listen to your words. They compare who you were yesterday to who you are becoming today. And every answer creates 10 more questions. Because your growth doesn't make sense to them. Most people need applause to continue. You don't. Most people need validation to believe in themselves. You don't. Most people seek comfort. You seek progress. And that's rare. Rare things become valuable. Valuable things become fascinating. Fascination becomes obsession. Haha. And the more they learn, the more uncomfortable they become. Because they realize something nobody likes admitting. You weren't built by success. You were built by suffering. You weren't shaped by easy victories. You were shaped by difficult seasons. You weren't strengthened by praise. You were strengthened by pain. And pain creates people that cannot be controlled easily. Powerful people understand this better than anyone. They know that storms create different creatures. That's why they pay attention. Not because you're famous. Not because you're rich. Not because you're loud. But because you've developed something that cannot be bought. Something that cannot be borrowed. Something that cannot be copied. A mind that keeps moving forward no matter what stands in front of it. Ha. And minds like that, they become impossible to ignore. Because people at the top understand one terrifying truth. A person with purpose is dangerous. A person with patience is dangerous. But a person with purpose, patience, and nothing left to prove, that's the kind of person that keeps powerful people awake at night. And once they recognize that, their curiosity stops being casual. Their attention stops being temporary. Their minds keep returning to the same question again and again. Who exactly are you becoming? Haha. You know what's truly hilarious? The truth has never been invisible. People just choose not to see it. Not because they can't. Because seeing it would force them to question everything they believe. And people hate that. They love comfortable lies. They love familiar stories. They love putting labels on others and pretending they've figured everything out. That's why they looked at you and thought they had the answers. They thought they knew your limits. They thought they knew your future. They thought they understood your value, but they only saw the surface. And the surface lies. Haha, because the strongest things are hidden. Roots are hidden. Foundations are hidden. Scars are hidden. The battles nobody applauds are hidden. And that's where the truth lived. Not in what you showed the world, but in what the world never bothered to notice. They saw your silence and called it weakness. They saw your patience and called it hesitation. They saw your isolation and assumed you were forgotten. But they didn't understand. Silence wasn't weakness. It was observation. Patience wasn't hesitation. It was preparation. Isolation wasn't punishment. It was transformation. While they were busy talking, you were busy becoming. While they were searching for shortcuts, you were surviving storms. While they chased comfort, you learned how to endure discomfort. And pain, haha. Pain has a strange way of revealing things. It removes illusions. It strips away distractions. It teaches lessons nobody wants but everyone needs. Most people run from suffering, but suffering became your teacher. Failure became your classroom. Rejection became your training. Loneliness became your companion. And slowly, without applause, without recognition, without permission, you became something different. Something people couldn't explain, because the hidden truth wasn't about talent. It wasn't about luck. It wasn't about circumstances. It was about what happened after every disappointment. Most people lose faith. You became stronger. Most people blame others. You looked inward. Most people become bitter. You became wiser. That's the truth they finally saw. Not perfection. Not superiority. Resilience. Haha. And resilience frightens people. Because resilience cannot be predicted. You can't scare it. You can't shame it. You can't break it with one bad day. People who survive enough darkness stop fearing temporary pain. And that's what they noticed. They noticed that life hit you again and again and again. Yet somehow, you kept standing, not smiling all the time, not pretending everything was easy, but standing, moving, learning, adapting, growing. And suddenly the picture changed. They stopped seeing a person. They started seeing a pattern that refused to disappear, a pattern that became stronger under pressure. And that's when the hidden truth became impossible to ignore. You weren't lucky. You were forged. You weren't gifted. You were tested. You weren't protected from storms. You were created by them. Haha. That's the part nobody likes. Everybody wants greatness. Nobody wants the fire that creates it. Everybody wants strength. Nobody wants the suffering that builds it. Everybody wants the crown. Nobody wants the scars beneath it. But scars tell stories. Scars reveal truths. And your scars carried messages people never bothered to read. Messages written in sleepless nights. Messages written in failures. Messages written in betrayal. Messages written in moments when nobody believed in you. And when they finally saw those messages, their perspective changed. Because they understood something terrifying. Everything they thought was holding you back was actually shaping you. Everything they thought would destroy you was preparing you. Everything they assumed was your weakness was becoming your advantage. Haha. Funny how life works. The things people pity today become the reasons they admire you tomorrow. The struggles they ignored become the evidence they cannot deny. And the hidden truth they finally discovered was never hidden from you. It was hidden from them. Because while they were looking for perfection, they failed to recognize endurance. While they were chasing appearances, they overlooked character. While they measured success by applause, they ignored the person who kept fighting in silence. And that's when they understood something they should have understood long ago. You weren't surviving by accident. You were becoming by design. And some truths, once they're seen, they can never be unseen. Haha, haha. Now this is where it becomes truly entertaining. Because people can ignore you for years. They can doubt you, laugh at you, forget about you, pretend you don't matter. But there's one thing they can never do forever. They can never ignore reality. And reality has a strange habit. Sooner or later, it knocks on every door. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make people uncomfortable. And once reality arrives, nobody sleeps the same. Because ignoring someone is easy, forgetting someone is easy, but pretending not to notice what stands right in front of you, haha, that becomes impossible. And that's exactly what happens. At first, they convince themselves you're just lucky, then they tell themselves it's temporary, then they say somebody else helped you, then they search for excuses, because accepting the truth hurts their pride. People don't mind success, they mind unexpected success. They don't mind winners. They mind the people they underestimated becoming winners. That's what burns. Not your growth, their misjudgment. Haha. Because every achievement forces them to remember something embarrassing. They were wrong, and pride hates those words. Pride would rather invent stories than admit mistakes. So they keep resisting, they keep explaining, they keep pretending, but the evidence keeps growing. Your discipline grows, your confidence grows, your wisdom grows, your presence grows, and suddenly, ignoring you requires effort. They start hearing your name in places they never expected. They start noticing your influence. They start seeing results they cannot explain away. And the more they try to avoid it, the more impossible it becomes. Because truth has weight. And weight cannot stay hidden forever. Ha! People at the top understand something most people don't. Patterns matter. Consistency matters. Character matters. And eventually, results matter. Not opinions. Not rumors, not assumptions, results. And results have a cruel sense of humor. They expose everyone. They expose fake confidence. They expose weak foundations. They expose lies. But they also expose hidden strength. And suddenly, people who once ignored you begin paying attention. People who dismissed you begin watching. People who underestimated you begin questioning themselves. Because now they face something terrifying. You don't need their approval anymore. You don't need their validation. You don't need their permission. And that changes everything. Haha. Nothing confuses people more than someone who stopped needing applause. Because most people are addicted to being seen. They're addicted to praise. They're addicted to approval. But you learned something different. You learned how to continue without recognition. You learned how to walk alone. You learned how to believe when nobody else did. And that kind of independence makes people uncomfortable, because it cannot be controlled. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be distracted easily. That's why they keep returning. That's why they keep watching. That's why they keep asking questions. Not because you're demanding attention, because your existence commands it. Without noise. Without begging. Without proving. Haha. Funny, isn't it? The same people who once overlooked you, now notice every move. The same people who once laughed, now listen carefully. The same people who once doubted, now speak your name differently. Not because you changed for them, because reality changed around them. Because results speak a language pride cannot silence. And suddenly, they realize something they never expected. Ignoring you was easy when you were invisible in their minds. But now you're everywhere. In conversations, in thoughts, in comparisons, in questions they don't know how to answer. And the hardest part for them, they don't know when it happened. They don't know which moment changed everything. They don't know when doubt turned into curiosity. When curiosity turned into respect. When respect turned into fascination. And when fascination became something they couldn't escape. Ha ha! Because once they can't ignore you anymore, something inside them changes. They begin measuring themselves differently. They begin questioning their own choices. They begin wondering what they missed. They begin wondering what you saw that they couldn't. And that's the dangerous part. Not that they finally noticed you, but that your existence becomes a reminder. A reminder that patience wins. A reminder that silence builds. A reminder that pain transforms. A reminder that underestimated people don't disappear. Sometimes they rise so quietly that by the time the world notices, their presence has already become impossible to escape. Haha.